Well, let's talk about Gravity Kills and The Point. The history with the radio station and the band goes back to 1993, which is wild to even think about.
And these guys would tell the story better. They were, I was living in Dallas at the time.
Mm-hmm. You guys had just announced that you were going to release Point Essential Volume 1, and Jeff had been on the Edge, Tales from the Edge in Dallas with his band.
So if people don't know, so Point Essential was like and we were talking about this.
Yeah,
Ray, if you don't know the story of this either. So the Point used to put out a CD every year that was just local bands. Right, it was called Point Essential, the best local bands, and people looked forward to hearing this and who was going to be on this thing every year.
Dude, me as a 13-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid getting an alternative and all that, was Point Essential. That was the curation of like, hey, this is who's working hard, who's doing some things, who you should be paying attention to. And it was the coolest, a compilation CD, a compilation type thing that you could get your hands on. And it really did start like a whole movement for a lot of local bands. A lot of kids like me were like, oh my God, you can do this and you don't have to be some giant star and you can get
everybody
on
from
CDs
The Urge to Stir.
Yeah.
To Modern Zero to you guys.
It was
inspiring.
inspiring.
They were all on Volume 1 with us, yeah. And so we had just moved. The three of us had played music together forever, moved to St. Louis. We knew the importance of it from Jeff being on it and Dallas on the Edge. And so we wrote a little song called Guilty.
What?
And then just to try to make the CD, we talked Jeff into flying up and cutting vocals for us. Our hope initially is if we can make the CD, maybe people hear that we're pretty good and we can find a local singer. And then, of course, the rest is history. Guilty took off, and Jeff's like, I think I'm flying up on the weekends to cut vocals. And then
we did a record, and then we just started doing a record. And then by Point Essential comes out, it was December 94 when it was released. By the end of February, I was already having record labels flying me to St. Louis for us to meet.
And you guys hadn't even played a show together?
No.
That's right.
So Guilty, the song Guilty, which, when you think of, 90s music, Guilty's one of the top songs of the 90s. You guys hadn't even played a show together.
No. In the first year that we cut Guilty late September of 94. By late September 95, we're on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack.
Yeah.
We're on the 7 soundtrack. We're finishing our first record, but haven't signed our record deal yet. We have a manager, but we haven't signed a management deal yet.
And our attorney says, I like the way you boys work.
we had an attorney. That's all we had.
TBT had given us a bunch of money. We hadn't signed anything with them.
Yeah, we hadn't signed anything. In fact, and then I remember, we talk, people talk about signing the record deals, and it's like a big deal, and you think there's going to be champagne and everything.
Yeah.
I was sitting at Doug's dining room table in my underwear, and it was coming up on Thanksgiving in 1995, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you got to sign the record deal," and I sat there in my underwear. It was like there was no party.
So 28 years ago this month, you're in your underwear at Doug's dining room table.
Signing a record deal.
Why were you in your underwear? I don't remember.
Because I had just woken up.
Sleeping on your couch.
I was sleeping on his couch.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I would come up and sleep on his couch, and because the studio was at his house, and so we would
go out and dig out change out underneath my car seat to go to McDonald's.
Oh, we were broke, man.
So Halloween, this is a great one. We're recording that record. No, we have no clue what day it is. Like the Les Claypool line. Weekends don't mean as much when you're unemployed. You get to hang out with your working friends more.
Yeah.
So we're like recording, and all of a sudden, like somebody started knocking on the door. We open it up, and these kids are like trick or treat, and we're like, it's Halloween. And he runs over to his pantry and gets out a can of SpaghettiOs and dumps it in this kid's like a pumpkin. And next thing we know is like there's like a line off his porch of kids like waiting for their can of SpaghettiOs.
That's funny. That's funny. So, wow, who was giving you guys advice? So you got record labels coming at you. You got a lawyer. You're trying to navigate this record business.
There's this book called This Business of Music. It was about 3 inches thick. It was the first book I ever read, and probably about the last book I ever read. And we just studied that book, or like every iteration of it, and just educated ourselves as much as we could going into it, so we didn't get screwed too bad.
Right. And then, so you signed with TVT. Who's on the label at that time? 9 Inch Nails?
Nails was it was by then Interscope and TVT had created nothing.
Right. Okay.
By then, but TVT still owned half of it. I think he ended up selling that half for like $30 million or something like that to Jimmy Iovine. But so he's on it, and really nobody else. We preceded Seven Dust
was coming up
by just by a year or two.
Yeah, Seven Dust kind of broke 98. Right?
Yeah.
1999.
Yeah. We first heard them. We were in a and we got a radio guy, John Perone. I think is out there listening right now. One of those guys. We were actually with a counterpart of it. We were the first time we ever heard Seven Dust. We were in Portland, Oregon, and we may have been out on the Sex Pistols tour. And we were in the back of a car, and they were called Crawl Space at the time.
Ah.
And then I guess there was another Crawl Space, so they had to change their name.
Was there the stereotypical, record label guy going, "We're gonna make you a star. We're gonna make you guys. Everybody's gonna know the name Gravity Kills."
Kurt and I were talking about that. Every label told us you'll never be on the radio.
Oh, okay.
You'll never be on
Take part in your
MTV.
music.
You're gonna tour forever in a van.
Did they want to change your sound?
No.
Well, so there was about 7 labels that flew to town. Well, for instance, we didn't know, at the time, Guilty blew up. I came home from work one day, and
what were you doing?
I'm an architect, and
Right.
by the way, I built your old studios down behind Union
Oh, you did?
Station. Yeah. And so I came home from work that one day, and I hit play on my answering machine. It was like, "Hi, this is Tim Devine from Capitol Records. Hi, this is
Craig Kalman he was Atlantic, yeah.
and
So you had all
Randy
these?
Jackson from Columbia.
Randy Jackson,
Yeah,
American Idol Randy Jackson?
Yeah, whatever. And these guys all flew to town, and half of them would be like, we're like, well, what do you guys think we should do? What's your advice? And I remember Randy Jackson going, you guys should all move to Los Angeles and just live in a house together. And we're like, yeah, I don't think that's happening. And but Tommy Serig is who flew in from TVT, and he was the one that got it. He just got it. They had all the wax tracks catalog TVT did at the time, and he understood that catalog. He understood what we were doing, and I think that we went with him just because he was the only one that really spoke our language.
Well, we hadn't played out live, and that's what kind of freaked out the other labels when Capitol Records came in, because we played them our music, and they were like, okay, and they're like, when do you guys, when can we see you? And we're like, well, you don't.
You're seeing us.
Yeah.
So,
and they would go,
and this is all happening without even playing one show?
We didn't play a show. We didn't play a show. We did Guilty September of '95, played our first show at a place called The Other World. It was November 4th. It'll be 28 years ago tomorrow.
But it's important.
Off of Wash Avenue.
Yeah, Washington Avenue. And we played for 1,000 people. Nobody knew what we looked like except our relatives. We had 900 paid and 100 on the list. And
we had played a gazillion shows together, and his bands had played a gazillion shows together, but us combined on stage, first time.
Wow.
it was crazy and super crazy. And true story, the Tommy Serig story. He came into town, and these guys aren't sure, and A&R guys they're kind of they're superstitious, I think.
A&R guys, if people don't know, they're the guys that go out and find the bands, and then they recommend to their bosses, like, hey, we need to sign these guys, and they kind of take you under their wing and mold you, right?
Yeah. And then so this guy flies into town, and he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go. He's getting in his rental car to go back to his hotel, and he turns on the radio, and he'd been listening to The Point, and Guilty was playing on the radio.
Serendipitous.
And he just puts his head down, and he gets the window down, and he says, "You'll have paper on Monday."
Wow.
Dang.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Turned it up and ripped off the knob.
I mean, that's movie.
Thing. And again,
That's script-like.
with The Point. The Point is what tipped. We weren't a band without The Point, and then The Point's the one. If they weren't playing the song at the time, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we. Who knows, right?
Who knows?
If we can
But
go
here
back
we
to
are.
Guilty, the story's a lot more harrowing. There's a huge portion of that. The Point had put out an all call in May saying, bands of St. Louis, send in your demo or send in your songs for Point Essential. What's going to be Point Essential Volume 1? So Kurt and Matt and I, we're like, we should do something. We should do something. Yeah, we should do something. And the summer's going by, and it's due in September. So June goes by. We should do something. Yeah, we should do something. July, August. We get to be, it's due on Friday. The weekend before that, we're like, we should do something. We should do something. We didn't even do that weekend. Literally the Monday before the Friday it was due, we had a little piece of music that kind of just went unsa, 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 chicka, 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 unsa, unsa. So Matt comes in. Matt's an industrial engineer. He comes in on Monday. I worked at a post-production facility. He comes in at lunchtime, throws his tie over his shoulder.
Coat and tie.
Guitar. And he starts cutting the guitar parts for what became Guilty. And I'm editing. I took the week off from my boss.
This is one of the biggest songs of the 90s, by the way, put together in less than a week.
Oh, this gets insane. So then on Tuesday...
Buckle up.
So I'm editing, and I get a week off from my boss. I'm like, hey, we're not doing any voiceovers this week. Can I just work on the song? He's like, sure, why not? All right. So editing, doing all this stuff. Kirk comes in, he works on it. We get to Wednesday, and it's just an instrumental. And I'm like, I think we could turn it in as an instrumental, but it's not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And we don't have a singer. We called up all of our old singers. We're like, we got this piece of music. And they're like, nah, dude.
I said to Kurt, the best singer we know is your cousin Jeff. Why
this
don't
is
you give him
on
a
Wednesday.
call?
We should have given Jeff a call. Because we're like, what are we
500
going to
miles
do?
away.
Do you remember who you called?
The other singers.
Yeah, the singers.
The others.
Well,
the guy's not in the studio with you right now.
Martin and
Rick, who sang with what then later became Stir.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
Anybody
some of our old singers when we were a cover band, and nobody, they were like, no. So we get to Wednesday, and it's like, we should have called Jeff. And Matt goes, I'll pay for half the ticket.
If we can get Jeff up here.
And I'm just like, oh my God, you guys, no way. So they call up Jeff and they say, so we have the song that's due on Friday. Can we fly you up tomorrow on Thursday and cut these vocals? So Jeff worked at Fox Photos.
Well, it wasn't a Fox photo. It was a place like that. It was a place like that.
So he goes, so Jeff's like, oh my God. It's like, we're turning in this song to this compilation, but with the point. So he calls back. He goes, okay, my boss says I have to work all day Thursday, but he'll drive me to the airport, and I'll take a puddle jumper all the way up to St. Louis, and he lands at but I have to be back at work first thing Friday morning. Yeah. So Jeff flies up, literally lands at 9:30, gets off the airplane. They give him, Kurt picks him up, gets him some Taco Bell real quick. He walks into the studio, maybe 10:30. Bam, let's hear the song. What's going on? He gets in the booth, kind of scats up. You
didn't have lyrics yet?
No lyrics. He just kind of scats it.
And Matt says, it sounds like you're saying I'm guilty. We're like, okay, bing, bing, bing.
I put it on a DAT. I sent him to another studio. You guys listen, go write some vocals. And so they're sitting around.
And by the way, a DAT, if people don't know, little bitty.
Yeah, digital audio tape. Yeah. So.
I'm like, I'm busy. I'm editing guitars and stuff. You guys go write some vocals. So about midnight, he walks in. He's like, I got vocals. Let's start cutting. Because you guys were like, it sounds like, because when you're scat, you do a scat vocal, it kind of sounds like you're saying words, and they're sitting around with like legal pads going. And it's funny because, you try to read all of this, it was like 1 and 1 and 1 makes 3, 1 and 1, why don't you see? Well, that rhymes. Good. Okay, right. Put it down.
Oh, yeah, the worst lyrics ever. And
and so he walks in and he just cuts the vocals till about 1:30. He's like, I got to get up, 6:30 a.m. flight. Got to take the puddle jumper back to
Dallas. Yeah.
And
then
we go back, sleep like 2 hours. I get up, I take him to the airport. I come back, and then my now wife, then girlfriend Bonnie, looks at me and she's like, "Well, how'd the song turn out?" And I said, "I think it's pretty good." And she goes, "Well, what are the lyrics?" And I'm like, "Hey, I'm guilty, and you're guilty too." And she goes, "What?" And then I went up to the office and I played it for a bunch of my friends, and they were in the car, literally like having like seizures,
spasms.
Go, this is so good. And I'm like, okay.
Well, we turned it in at 5:30. I slept on the floor in the studio for a couple hours. Got up, kept editing, mixing. We turned it in at 5:30, and it's so uneventful because you walk in the station, and the lady's sitting at the front desk, and you're like, "Hi, we're turning in a song."
We're a local band.
Local band. I give her this little DAT tape, and she's like, "Okay, thank you." And she just puts
it down. Put it on the
standing
pile.
there, like, well, goodbye.
Yeah. And apparently, it was the song was kind of a lightning rod at the station. I mean, there were people that were totally into it, and then there were people that just
were
hated
not into it,
which is kind of the way we roll here in St. Louis. I think
that's kind of what
we
you
have
want.
to mention Alex Luke and Jim McGuire.
Yeah, they're two guys that were at the station at the time. And then
Gravity Kills one out, and Guilty was on the playlist for a long time, and the Point played the crap out of it.
Yeah, we had turned it in. It was such a whirlwind week that then you just forgot about it. You were like kind of done with it. And we put it away September, October, November. Didn't really talk about it. And then Kurt was kind of like, I'm getting weird reactions from people. I'm playing it for people and they're kind of freaking out. I'm like, really? I don't even know. So in December rolls around and that's when the on air. And they're like, we're going to announce all the bands. And it was that long. I mean, we just kind of forgot about it for 4 months.
And that's when I came up for the release party at Mississippi Nights. And then we cut the track that's on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack that weekend, and we did a song called Inside, which we'll
when the label started showing up, we only had 3 songs and it never played out live because we were like when we made the compilation because then they were like and started charting. They had charts back then. Top 25 countdown.
Record, R&R magazine and all that stuff.
So it starts climbing the charts. It's like you guys are at number 19 this week, and we're like,
Yeah, and it just kind of a whirlwind.
And in 1914, we got up to number 2, and that's when the label started calling because they're reading the trade magazines, and they're calling the station, going, "Who is Gravity Kills, and why are they, at number 6 this week?" And they're like, "It's this local band." So they're putting 2 and 2 together, and they're extrapolating. They're like, if they're charting top 10 in a number 19 market, what can they do in nationally? And so that's easy math.
Yeah.
So that's when we were like, oops, I guess we're a band now.
You weren't
like,
even
we got to
really
do
a
this.
Band.
We weren't really thinking about that at that point. And then we got on the compilation and all the stuff started happening. It's like, we're going to be a band. Because then we thought, there might be a slight revolt at that point, and there kind of was anyway, to a certain degree in town, who are these guys? And
you felt guilty.
Yeah, and then right. But then you become friends with the whole community there. Hang out with.
Was there jealousy in the local scene?
I think at first I don't know if there was jealousy in the local scene. I think
there was I think the conflict was like there was Spotlight Magazine and Riverfront Times, and then there were their bands, and then there was the bands that The Point was promoting.
Yeah,
and it really felt like a lot of those magazines at the time just felt like, hey, wait a minute, like The Point started dictating the course of the local music scene. With those compilations.
Well, and The Point was new. We played the first birthday show at the Galaxy.
Huh. There was also that perception that we had just come together like an American Idol type thing.
Yeah.
And
before
people,
American Idol.
People didn't realize that Kurt and I have played in bands together. Well, we've known each other since 2nd grade.
It's been 40 years.
And we
now.
were neighbors, and we played in bands together since we were 15, 16 years old. And then in some versions of those bands,
I was around.
Doug and I were on the same Little League team together, right? Then he played in bands. All this time, Jeff had various bands going, and we always looked up to Jeff.
And
Kurt and I are cousins.
And so we looked up to Jeff, who even was teaching us things about songwriting. And so we've been in and out of studios, recording studios. We did the hard road just like everybody else.
Yeah, and it's always like that. That's the story with so many people. Everybody's like, oh, how's it feel to be an overnight success? You're like, man.
It wasn't overnight.
It's a Beatles long night. It's a Beatles playing in Germany for years and years and years.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
There's so many different skill sets honed apart and together. There's no such thing as an overnight success.
To chime in on the new Beatles track that you played this morning, I hear Jeffrey Lynne in that track.
Really?
Yeah, because if Harrison did, if Harrison was working with he worked with Jeff Lynne probably on the record that when he cut those guitars, he may have been working with Jeffrey Lynne.
Yeah. And that's ELO's singer.
What's going around, we didn't even talk about it today, but I'm interested in your guys' take on this. Because, we're all similar age musicians, have been doing this for a long time. There's a lot of talk right now, and people are talking about John Lennon's vocals. And they're throwing around just the isolated track, the ISO track of his vocal. How do you guys feel about that? I feel like that's sacrilegious. The guy's not around to say, like, hey, it's okay for you to look at one paint of this painting, one brushstroke of this painting. What do you guys feel like? If somebody were to take your vocal tracks and put them out there and be like, yo, check out these, just the vocal only, the isolated vocal tracks from Gravity Kills. How do you feel about that?
Boy.
I feel really weird about it.
As a vocalist, it's very uncomfortable anyway. If you've ever, you guys listen to your own voice every morning is weird, right?
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, somebody like John Lennon or the Beatles.
At the same time, it's Paul McCartney going, okay.
Yeah, and and the music at some point doesn't belong to you anymore. I think is when you're a Beatle. or you're talking about Aerosmith this morning. I think at some point, you're just as the voice, you're just the vehicle at that point. It belongs to kind of the ownership of that evolves into something else, I think.
Well, I've never heard an isolated vocal that wasn't impressive, especially from back then. You had to sing, and you'll hear like David Lee Roth isolated vocals without auto-tune or anything, and you're like, and it's always impressive. Like, nobody's listening to isolated vocals cutting it down.
I heard Bohemian Rhapsody. Freddie Mercury's isolated vocal for that is just
I bet it's
incredible.
amazing. Yeah,
and how he multi-tracked. They didn't have that many. You were lucky to lock two 24-track tape machines together, but they just layered and layered. And your bouncing tracks, you're taking one track and laying it on top of another, which makes it permanent, and then taking another one because
it's sound on sound.
Right, and they're stacking, and it's very nerve-wracking. But you're trying to make this kind of like.
I think to answer your question, I think in that case, like, given that Paul McCartney's there, and given that he's not like he's not desperate by any means, I think that he's a good shepherd for that. But I mean, I definitely think
I do
that
too.
in some cases it would be it's unnerving to think
I just feel I think it's weird. I don't think like in the movie business you could like get a director to be like, oh, let's just show you one cut of one thing before anything else is done. Like it's a full blown painting, and I'm singing a different approach depending on the song. I'm not singing to be isolated and impress you or any of that kind of stuff. I'm singing to serve the song, and that's the single piece of art that I've chosen to release. And it's weird when somebody like decides that you can just break that down and then make it, its own standing thing.
That is a teaching tool. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah,
coming from the
professional to professional, for
recording
sure.
side of things, that's, you can put it in front of a new generation and let them, you know what I mean? Maybe there's people that can get, have a takeaway from it by listening to it isolated, or even now remixing with it.
Yeah, that makes sense.